Our meeting is translated into English. If you want to hear the meeting in English, please choose on the device number 2. If you want to speak, hello? Słychać? Halo, halo, witam serdecznie. Proszę o zajęcie miejsc.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Please take seats.
We are ready to start. No już prosiłem. Please take your seats. We are going to start our meeting. Our meeting is translated into English. If you want to hear English, please choose on your device number 2. If you want to hear in Polish, please choose number 1. Szanowni Państwo,
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of Caritas and friends of Ukraine, welcome at the seat of Caritas Polska at the first historic charity forum. The situation at our eastern border makes us anxious. We look with anxiety on what is happening in Ukraine. Suffering, pain, death, and damage, which do not spare even children, make us open our hearts and our wallets as well. Today we will have the opportunity to listen to the experts at this first charity forum. There will be 2 discussion panels. First one, entitled Polish Society's Assistance to Ukraine's Refugees. And the second panel, Poland and the international community, key partners in the Ukraine humanitarian response. I will give the floor to Reverend Marcin Iżycki, Caritas Poland director, who will give award to 2 our partner organizations. the details will follow. So let me give the floor to the host of this place and of this forum, Reverend Marcin Iżycki. Thank you very much. Dear ministries, dear excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you at Caritas Polska at this first part of our charity forum, during which we will want to make a summary of our assistance activities for Ukrainians refugees in Poland after 100 days after the war broke. And we will also discuss the challenges and problems that Ukraine is facing during this first 100 days of war. We will also discuss future perspectives of economic development of this country and propositions of our response of Caritas networks, our other NGOs and governmental organizations and international organizations, how we can respond to the future challenges. Let me welcome the panelists. Minister Jarosław Szajner, head of the Refugee Authority, Minister Bartosz Baraszczuk, Secretary of State in the Ministry of Finance, head of the Treasury Administration, Maria Neyman, Secretary General of Caritas Europe, Mr. Skipper, President of PKO BP Bank, Mrs. Tetiana Stevici, Director of Caritas Ukraine, Vyacheslav Grenevich, Director of Caritas Spes Ukraine, Martin Letieri, Coordinator between UNHCR agencies, David Thomas, Head of the Food Program of United Nations, Mr. Scott Chilas, managing Polish Humanitarian Action activities. Let me also welcome the representatives of the President of the Republic of Poland, the advisor to the President, Mr. Zdzisław Sokala. I'm also glad to welcome all the representatives of state authorities and NGOs, the delegates of the science and our donors. HP, MasterCard, Biedronka, Europol and Gas, Mondi, Huawei, Kaufland, Millennium Bank, Alior Bank Foundation, Rossmann, Frisco, Lidl, Biedronka, Paj, PKO SA, NBP, Poczta Polska, ArcelorMittal, Polska Bezgotówkowa Foundation. I hope I have not forgot anyone. I also welcome the representatives of national branches of Caritas, including Brussels International Head of Caritas and Caritas Internationalis from Vatican. I also welcome the priests from the dioceses. I see priests from Wrocław, Włocławek, Przemyśl, Zamość. I also welcome all people who attend this conference online. I also welcome the priests from the dioceses who serve Ukrainians on a daily basis and who support humanitarian transports of goods to Ukrainians. Thank you very much, and we also transfer this thanksgivings to the voluntaries. Let me also quote John Paul II when he spoke at United Nations in 1992. He said, "We have to combat our fear of the future, and we cannot combat it. We cannot fight this fear being separated. We only can do it together." So I wish us a fruitful discussion. Let's us have a specific discussion that will result in helping those in need even better. I will be privileged to meet you again this evening, tonight at the jazz concert that you are all invited. Thank you very much. Having such fantastic audience, I will give the award Ubi Caritas and also the medal of Deus Caritas Est to the persons who specifically help us in our mission to serve other people. Solidarity and openness to share what we have, what we can afford, is what makes a community which will be able to respond to the biggest crisis, just like the one at our eastern border. So, seizing this opportunity that we have such a fantastic audience, let me thank the whole business community, because your openness and your openness and your readiness to help was really beyond our expectations. We could count on you from the very beginning of my work, and especially when the pandemic broke, it was especially visible, and now when this war in Ukraine broke. Thank you very much. Today we will be awarding two special rewards to thank for the support and for the funds given that will help us to provide foster care for the youngest Ukrainian refugees who got to Poland without their caregivers. During the holiday, we will be organizing for children from Ukraine holiday stays where they will be able to integrate with their new Polish friends and colleagues. And when the school year starts, they will get from us all the necessary supplies for school. For helping Caritas during this Ukrainian crisis, I award this golden medal of Caritas Polska to HP company, represented by Mariusz Gola, sales director.
Proszę nie zabrać.
Za to wszystko, co przeczytałem, ale nie tylko za to.
For the same things, but not only that, also multi-annual support in different activities. For example, when we had to do a movie about Caritas Polska, the CEO was really easy to convince. It took me only a minute to give support to this project, and it always is like this. So UBI Caritas award goes to Bartosz Ciołkowski, General Director of MasterCard, Poland, Czech Republic and Slovakia. Sorry, the speaker is not using a microphone. Like refugee crisis last year, or meetings with the youth, or the Ukrainian war, it all inspires us. You inspire us, and we always are convinced when we enter this building. It wouldn't be possible otherwise. Thank you very much, and thank you to the whole team of Caritas. We thank all the donors. Awards were also given to another institution that was supporting us strongly in the past. Jeronimo Martins, the director Arkadiusz Mierzwa is also with us. Thank you again. I thank to all our business partners, because thanks to you, and of course thanks to the parishes and dioceses, we were able to collect the record amount of funds to help Ukrainians, and we distribute this through Polish churches, and we also transfer the gifts to Ukraine. So thanks to your support and your openness of the companies that you represent, we will help hundreds of children who found safety in our country. Those activities for Ukrainians would not be possible without the support of the business, and let me thank you for that once again.
Szanowni Państwo, teraz mam
Ladies and gentlemen, now I have the privilege to invite you to a short video
Caritas na rzecz
that will summarize our activities
w tym dramatycznym kryzysie.
to help Ukraine in its dramatic crisis. 100 days of Caritas Poland solidarity with Ukraine. This is the title of the movie
Caritas Polska
that illustrates what we have been doing during this Ukrainian crisis.
pomocową naszej
It illustrates the charity activity, direct help in Ukraine, and also what we did for refugees here in Poland.
serdecznie zapraszam.
Podsumowanie działań Caritas na rzecz Ukrainy. W pierwszych tygodniach wojny otworzyliśmy w pasie przygranicznym namioty nadziei. Nasi wolontariusze dyżurowali w dzień i w nocy, m.in. w Krościenku, Korczowej, Zosinie czy na dworcu PKP w Przemyślu. Do wszystkich punktów recepcyjnych we współpracy ze służbami granicznymi dostarczyliśmy żywność, termosy, koce. W samym tylko Przemyślu dziennie rozdawano około 30 000 kanapek i kilka tysięcy litrów zupy. Do dziś prowadzimy w Przemyślu pokój dla matki z dzieckiem. Przez pewien czas taki pokój funkcjonował także w Warszawie. Na Ukrainę przekazaliśmy dary rzeczowe, których szacunkowa wartość przekroczyła 140 milionów złotych. Wśród artykułów znalazła się m.in. żywność, środki higieniczne, zaopatrzenie medyczne, leki, wózki inwalidzkie czy generatory prądu. Do tej pory udało się przekazać około 20 000 ton różnego rodzaju darów. Gdybyśmy chcieli je teraz przetransportować, potrzebowalibyśmy około 1000 tirów. Ulepszamy logistykę, by skutecznie wspierać mieszkańców Ukrainy. Współpracujemy przy tym z partnerami zrzeszonymi w międzynarodowej sieci Konfederacji Caritas Internationalis, przede wszystkim z 2 Caritas na Ukrainie, czyli Caritas Spes i Caritas Ukraina, a także z amerykańską Catholic Relief Services, Caritas Switzerland czy Caritas Deutschland. Uruchomiliśmy 2 centra logistyczne na terenie Caritas Archidiecezji Przemyskiej oraz Lubelskiej. Poprawiamy płynność i szybkość transportów humanitarnych. W efekcie wspólnych działań powstał transgraniczny hub o powierzchni ponad 3000 m2 z magazynem zarządzanym przez pracowników Caritas Archidiecezji Lubelskiej. Uruchomiliśmy program Paczka dla Ukrainy, dzięki któremu każdy może wspierać mieszkańców Ukrainy wysyłając dary rzeczowe. Do tej pory do najbardziej potrzebujących trafiło 38 000 paczek. Paczka ma określony wymiar i masę, a dokładną listę produktów, które powinny się w niej znaleźć, zamieściliśmy na stronie caritas.pl/paczka dla Ukrainy. Wartość jednej paczki to około 300-400 zł, co oznacza, że dotychczasową pomoc od polskich darczyńców w ramach tej akcji można oszacować na kwotę około 13 milionów złotych. Dalsza pomoc w Polsce. Jednym z pierwszych i najpilniejszych naszych działań na rzecz uchodźców była pomoc żywnościowa. W czasie szczególnego natężenia ruchu na granicy polsko-ukraińskiej wydaliśmy ponad 1,5 miliona posiłków. Około 2500 dzieci ukraińskich objęliśmy opieką i wsparciem edukacyjnym. Placówki Caritas przyjęły 700 dzieci z domów dziecka wraz z ich opiekunami oraz pomogliśmy w relokacji dzieci potrzebujących specjalistycznej pomocy do odpowiednich ośrodków za granicą. Zapewniamy porady psychologiczne i wsparcie prawne. Do tej pory z pomocy psychologicznej skorzystało blisko 5000 osób, a z pomocy prawnej 2000. Pomoc uchodźcom świadczyło około 20 000 wolontariuszy Caritas, w tym około 1500 przy granicy polsko-ukraińskiej. Ponad 400 000 uchodźców z Ukrainy skorzystało z pomocy socjalno-informacyjnej oferowanej przez Caritas, w tym osoby niepełnosprawne, seniorzy, rodziny i dzieci. 24 kwietnia w całej Polsce odbył się Dzień Dobra. Planowane od ponad roku święto Caritas i związanych z organizacją wolontariuszy stało się okazją do integracji polsko-ukraińskiej. Telewizja Polska transmitowała na żywo finałowy koncert charytatywny. Tego samego dnia nasi przyjaciele z kościołów wschodnich obchodzili Wielkanoc. Dla nich Caritas diecezjalne we współpracy z Polskim Holdingiem Hotelowym i innymi partnerami zorganizowały śniadania wielkanocne, w których udział wzięło około 20 000 osób. Uruchomiliśmy 30 centrów pomocy migrantom i uchodźcom na terenie Polski, w których można uzyskać wsparcie psychologiczne, prawne, pośrednictwo pracy, opiekę nad dziećmi oraz szereg kursów, w tym językowych czy związanych z odnalezieniem się na rynku pracy. Jedno z najnowszych centrów pomocy migrantom i uchodźcom działa w Warszawie przy ulicy Towarowej 25A. Niezwykła jest nasza gościnność. Tysiące rodzin, parafii, zakonów, stowarzyszeń i ośrodków Caritas gościło i ciągle gości uchodźców. Nie zapominamy o pomocy finansowej dla uchodźców. Blisko 2700 kart przedpłaconych, honorowanych w sklepach spożywczych o łącznej wartości prawie 2,5 miliona złotych. 20 600 e-kodów na zakup żywności w sieci sklepów Biedronka o łącznej wartości 1 348 000 złotych. 3000 kart Sodexo do bankomatów o łącznej wartości 3 840 000 złotych. W najbliższym czasie planujemy zrealizować kolejne działania pomocowe zakrojone na dużą skalę. Po pierwsze, chcemy rozszerzyć program Rodzina Rodzinie na rodziny, które pozostały na Ukrainie. Wartość początkowa przedsięwzięcia wynosi 1 000 000 euro. Po drugie, chcemy przekazać 1 000 000 euro na pomoc psychologiczną dla osób z Ukrainy, mierzących się z traumą związaną z wojną. Chcemy w tym roku zapewnić dzieciom z Ukrainy letni wypoczynek, który pozwoli im odzyskać radość i stanie się okazją do integracji. W ramach wakacyjnej akcji Caritas z kolonii skorzysta 1635 dzieci ukraińskich przebywających w Polsce. Dziękujemy wszystkim, którzy wsparli działania Caritas. Dziękujemy również partnerom, sponsorom, darczyńcom i wszystkim ludziom dobrej woli.
Rzeczywiście, ten film, aż samemu mi się łezka wokół
Well, this film was really very moving.
całe społeczeństwo polskie.
I think that the whole Polish population, in fact, passed the exam, showing that our hearts were open to our neighbors from Ukraine.
Teraz chciałbym przekazać głos
And
panu
now
Tomaszowi Surdelowi.
I would like to give the microphone to Mr. Tomasz Surdel, who is going to moderate the discussion panels, and I'm also inviting all the guests that are going to discuss. Please sit on those white armchairs.
Our meeting is translated into English. If you want to hear English language, please choose number 2 on your device. If you want to hear Polish, please choose number 1 your device. Dziękuję. Proszę siadać.
Please take your seats.
Dzień dobry.
Good morning. My name is Tomasz Surdel, and I'm going to moderate this first panel dedicated to what we call national issues, as we call it here in Caritas, Polish Society's assistance to Ukraine's refugees, helping and inclusive help. Well, it could seem to be quite official, but this is about the help we have provided to 3 million refugees from Ukraine. We have today Minister Jarosław Scheiner from the Polish Agency for the Refugees, for the foreigners. For those of you who don't know, this is the main organization in Poland dealing with the legalization of people from abroad in Poland. We've got also Mr. Martin Lettieri, who is the coordinator between the UNHCR agencies. We've got Mr. Leszek Skiba, chairman of the PKO SA Bank. We've got Mr. Łukasz Skoczylas, managing missions of the Polish Humanitarian Mission, and Reverend Dr. Marcin Iżycki, director of Caritas Polska, our host. Today, it's been 110 days from the war in Ukraine, from the Russian aggression on independent Ukraine, a crisis the humanitarian consequences of which are felt very strongly here in Poland because of our geographical location. Let us just mention the 3 million plus war refugees that have crossed the border of our country during those 110 days. That was a huge, unprecedented challenge to all of us, to the Polish society, to the Polish state, to the local governments and various helping organizations, national and international alike. So first of all, one question to all our guests. What are the specific challenges you have been confronted with, and were you able to face them? The minister could start, please.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much.
Państwo,
Ladies and gentlemen, this question is a very general one. What were the challenges? Well, there were really many challenges here. First of all, we had this aggression, which was performed by a dictator, by Putin, against an independent country that Ukraine is. But if we talk about the charity actions, helping others, as the title of this panel says, the first and biggest challenge was to help those in need without assessing if they deserved it or not, helping everyone. Because as the moderator has said, 110 days have elapsed from February 24th, even more than that. So in a normal, ordinary life, 110 days is not too much. Well, it goes fast, but for a small kid that needs to leave everything behind, that needs to leave everything behind and flee, taking just, you know, just one object or just one backpack and leave their country, every day is extremely long. Every day during which they're asking their mothers, "Mom, are we going to get back home tomorrow? Are we going to go back to Ukraine tomorrow?" This is what it looks like. People arriving here want to get back to their country, to their independent country, to their homeland. They want to go back. I've got a daughter who is attending kindergarten, and she's talking about buddies from Ukraine that were joined to her class. And when they discuss, they're asking when Ukraine is going to defeat Putin. And my daughter is always repeating it. My daughter is not understanding the length of time. She is 5 years old, and for her it's extremely long. So it is very important throughout this time to be able to supply help, to do it better and better, so that Ukraine's citizens would know that we are not forgetting them, that we are still here, that we are still supporting them. We are supporting those arriving here. Today I am in fact replacing Minister Paweł Szefernaker, who is the plenipotentiary of the government for the welcoming of war refugees from Ukraine in Poland. Every day he's meeting NGOs, he's meeting representatives of local governments, he's meeting people who arrived here from Ukraine, and every day he listens to their needs, to their problems, and most importantly, what we need to face, he needs to react on a daily basis to the needs, which are variable. At the beginning, it was about providing shelter, food, some everyday help on a short-term basis. So information points, reception points have been prepared, as well as residential locations for them. Then medical aid was prepared for those people, but there were other needs that appeared. Needs such as work, education, or daily support in the everyday life, training, nostrification of diplomas, and the Polish government is answering on a daily basis to those needs. But most importantly, the government is answering to it, listening to the NGOs, to the local governments, and the cooperation is key here. So that's how we can understand problems better. Thank you very much.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much.
To może tak po kolei,
Okay,
jak
so
to
let's move
wygląda
to
z
the next
perspektywy
person.
międzynarodowej?
From the international perspective, how does
czy
it
w ogóle
look like?
generalnie agendy
Is the
humanitarne ONZ
UNHCR and in
dały się
general the
zaskoczyć
agendas of the United Nations,
stawiły im
were
czoła,
they
czy stawiły
surprised?
im
How
czoła
did
tym
they
wyzwaniom?
face the challenges? Did they face the challenges?
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure for UNHCR being here today. Thanks for the invitation, sharing this important panel, and really amazed for the incredible work that Caritas Poland is doing here in the country and to support Ukraine too. I think some of the most important challenges were mentioned just before for my colleague. I would say that everyone is surprised for the response of Poland, but considering the speed of the movement, as was said before, in just 100 days, we have seen one of the largest influx of the recent years worldwide. So I think at the beginning, particularly at the beginning, the opportunity to see the commitment of the government, of the national government, the voivodeship level government, of the subnational government, and the whole society, because here we have just seen the synergies between the private sector, a charity organization like Caritas, but the whole society, the voluntarism, the commitment, the responsibility of the society itself, I think surprised everything in a good way, in a positive way. And at the same time, we as UNHCR, we have to deal with a refugee crisis all over the world, and we try to deal with different areas and different moments, but particularly to support, in this case, the coordination of many humanitarian actors, international actors, of course, the UN community, the humanitarian and relief community, but also international NGOs, to coordinate with the response led by the national government and the national NGOs that were part or somehow lead the commitment. At the same time, in terms of challenges, we are seeing, as UNHCR, maybe two main topics that need to be, that I think most of us here could agree about this. We are maybe in a second phase in terms of integration. We are seeing more and more, and in our conversations with the key actors here, some of them that are represented here, we are seeing concerns about mid and long-term accommodation, creating livelihoods opportunities, employment, education after the summer. So we are thinking in this mid and long-term needs to address, because sadly no one knows what could happen in the next weeks and months. And the second area is to continue keeping all the eyes open in terms of possibilities of new influx, but also movements between the borders, because from previous experiences we know that it could happen, and all the experience that was mentioned before need to be systematized, make more sustainable, be more maybe working preparedness for a possible second movement, second wave in different directions. Thanks.
Dziękuję. To może zanim oddam głos
you.
praktykom, czyli reprezentantom
before
organizacji
giving
pomocowych,
the mic
to
to the
pozwolę się
practitioners, to
powiedzieć panu prezesowi
those
banku
who are
PKO-SA,
helping directly, let
bo
me
dla
give the
biznesu w
microphone
Polsce to
to
też było
the chairman
duże
of
wyzwanie.
PKO-SA, the bank.
I może kilka słów wyjaśnienia właśnie
And
dla
it was
osób,
also
które
a
naszych
huge
gości z
challenge
zagranicy,
for the business
bo mogą o tym
community.
nie wiedzieć.
Maybe
W chwili w
our guests
Polsce
from abroad do not know
praktycznie
that,
każdy
but
bank
today in
ma
Poland almost
wersję
every
strony
bank
internetowej
has
po
got a
ukraińsku.
Ukrainian version of
Większość
its
rzeczy można
bank website.
załatwić
So
po ukraińsku
most
w
things
bankach.
can
Są
be done in
formularze po
Ukrainian at the
ukraińsku.
banks. There are also forms to be
Wyobrażam
filled
sobie,
in
że to nie
Ukrainian.
było łatwa
I
operacja
guess that
logistyczna,
this operation
przygotowanie tego
logistically
wszystkiego.
was not an easy
Więc
one.
chciałbym
It
się
was
zapytać
hard to
pana
prepare all
prezesa,
that,
jak
so
to
I'd like to
wyglądało,
ask
jakie
you,
to było
Mr. Chairman,
wyzwanie i jak
how
sobie
did
z
it
tym
look like?
poradziliście?
Was it a huge challenge? How did you face it? Yes,
ta
indeed.
sytuacja oznaczała dla wielu firm
This situation
taką nagłą zmianę
meant for many companies a brutal change in the way in which they were offering their services to people from Ukraine. For many years now, in fact, the banking sector was already prepared, we must say, because we had more than 1 million people before the war from Ukraine working here in Poland.
To, co było istotne, to to, żeby w miarę szybko w ciągu
Therefore,
paru
the
dni
important thing was to be able to offer the services on a short notice, just in a few days, making it possible for them to function here, to live here in Poland, because the banking sector was able not only to propose services in Ukrainian, but also special bank accounts, and most banks have offered such accounts for people who would arrive here and will get some funding, could have at once a bank account number, so that those allowances could be wired to that bank account. So that was absolutely needed. We have also proposed to Ukrainian companies to open their accounts here, because we have seen that some of the companies considered that moving to Poland for some time would be important. So the activity was moved here, and they just needed a bank account in order to be able to work. But there are also other important things. Besides all those standard services that everybody has and that is adapted to the needs of people from Ukraine, we have seen today companies getting awards, and I would like to congratulate all those companies. So all the companies have tried to support in different scales associations and organizations such as Caritas, for instance. We have seen that there were needs, and the reaction to those needs took the form of donations. But this is also about the cooperation with local associations. We have seen many smaller entities that started activities on a local level, plus a very important thing, volunteering. At PKO Bank, we are supporting a lot the volunteering of our employees, which means that in those first days of war, we have launched the solutions we had for volunteering. Several hundred people from the bank went to the border trying to help, maybe helping also Caritas. There are many of them, and they were helping various initiatives. So from our point of view, it was important for those people to be able to dedicate their time to this kind of action, to this activity, answering the need that appeared there. Every employee was able to dedicate 2 days of work to volunteering. Some people tried to help more than that. I think that what is important is that companies are not only offering money, but they're also supporting this charity approach via volunteering. And we had many such initiatives. Our bank is present in many places in Poland, and such initiatives supported by us, helping Ukrainian mothers, children,
właśnie też
support for
z
the
Caritasem
kids.
diecezji
We've been
zamojsko-lubaczowej było
also
bardzo dużo.
active
To
with
jest,
the Caritas
to jest element,
of
który oznacza, że
Zamość
wspieramy,
and Lubaczów regions.
pracowników, którzy chcą wykorzystać
This means
swój
that we are
czas
helping the
na,
employees
na
who wanted to
działalność
use their
właśnie tam na
time
miejscu,
to
tam, gdzie są
help there
lokalne, konkretne potrzeby,
where
w
local
ramach,
needs appeared.
swojej własnej inicjatywy polegającej na tym, że
They're
kilka
doing
osób
this on their
przystępuje
own
z
initiative,
jednego wydziału
just
i podejmuje próby,
grouping
żeby to
several
robić
people
też
from one
sami
branch
na
and doing something together. I had also the opportunity to visit some branches of the bank, and I have seen employees who during the day
zajmowali się zakładaniem kont dla Ukraińców,
were opening bank accounts for Ukrainians, and in the afternoon they were going to the Ukrainian border with sandwiches.
Inicjatywa, że aktywność, która polega na tym, że dowozimy kanapki, dowozimy
So the activity could take
I to jest właśnie taka
the form
akcja
of
wolontariatu,
going
czyli
with
właśnie
sandwiches with food
wolontariat
to the places where there are people in need. So that was our volunteering activity within this process which has been prepared by the company, and it's important to support this kind of an attitude because it's not only about money, it's also important about making it possible to do the right thing. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo. No i teraz prosiłbym o
Thank you
zabranie
very
głosu
much.
praktyków,
Now I would like to give the floor to the practitioners,
przedstawicieli organizacji
that
pomocowych.
is representatives of the
Najpierw może pan Łukasz
Humanitarian
Skoczylas,
organizations. Łukasz Skoczylas,
Polskiej Akcji
the
Humanitarnej.
Director Manager managing of missions of Polish Humanitarian Action.
Czy nas to wszystko zaskoczyło?
Were we surprised by all of that?
Powiedziałbym, że
I would say that no, we weren't.
Nawet przed rozpoczęciem
Even before the war broke,
przygotowywaliśmy się do tego, co
we
się może stać.
were preparing to what may happen because it was visible
Sytuacja się
that the situation is
nabila.
becoming more and more
Natomiast
tense.
skala tego wszystkiego,
But of course, the scale
była,
of the situation
porażająca w
was
jakimś sensie. Musimy pamiętać, że polska akcja
compelling.
humanitarna tu
We
w
have to
Warszawie,
remember
tu
that
w
Polish
Polsce,
humanitarian
to jest tak
action
zwane
here in
nasze
Poland, here in Warsaw, is our HQ, headquarters, as we can say. We are managing missions that are run in Iraq, Jordan, many countries. So now we had to become mission for ourselves, not to serve further places in the world, but to become a mission here. So we had to reorganize very quickly. So just like Caritas Polska, we were very quick to present ourselves, to report ourselves to the border. Our mission in Ukraine is on from 2014, 2015, so quite some time from the very beginning of the conflict. Our mission was based in Kramatorsk. We have been working with the former contact line. So our activities were disrupted by the war. What we were doing had to end. Some people had to be evacuated. We had to rebuild these functionalities from scratch and not to focus on ourselves, because it wasn't the point to evacuate ourselves and to help ourselves. We wanted to assist others, but it was very difficult in this context. It is still difficult, but we are still doing that. What we are doing is to keep assisting on the other, behind the enemy lines, behind the front line. Polish Humanitarian Action is a politically neutral organization, and as such we can serve anywhere the help is needed. We can serve any soldier or civilian, no matter on which side of the border or of the front line he is. So helping behind the enemy lines is as important to us as staying and being active on the Ukrainian side. We want this help to really get to everyone in need, and we are doing it, not giving up. No matter how long this conflict will last, we will be there to help, both in Poland and very intensively now in Ukraine, where huge convoys of PAH, our organization, are still being distributed. We employ many people. We engage lots of partners to cooperation so that our network of assistance can spread out, can roll out, can get deeper to the region, to the ground, also to the areas covered by the war or where most refugees came. So we are acting very strongly on the front line or at the area of war.
I ksiądz dr Marcin Iżycki, dyrektor
Reverend
Caritas Polska.
Marcin Iżycki, director of Caritas Polska, please.
Zobaczyliśmy film, także ja będę krótko mówił.
You saw the film summarizing what we are doing, so let me focus maybe more on emotions that assisted me, that they witnessed. There are two dominating feelings. First was a great surprise with the scale of the conflict. As it turned out, I was in Ukraine when the war broke, in Lviv. So just like the previous speaker said, we could expect something to happen. We could expect that Donbas region will be under attack, will be under siege, but we weren't expecting that it will go so far. The scale was surprising. And the second feeling was sadness, deep sadness, because of all of that. Several days before I got back from Kiev, and I was so sorry for the people who stayed there under attack. I thought that this war of this kind is a matter of history now, or the matter of other continents. I would never say that it can be present on such scale in Europe, that such murder can happen on huge scale in Europe, and that Europe will not respond that strongly, especially Western Europe. But I have a deep feeling that our sadness will turn into joy. This is the joy of helping, of being united. Let me tell you that we were very quick to respond, very quick to fight, and this was possible thanks to the network that we have, Caritas Poland network, thanks to the dioceses, thanks to other Caritases in Lublin, Przemyśl, Zamość, at the border region. In the first days of conflict, we coordinated our activities and we started to help. So, and also I'm talking about Caritas Internationalis, Caritas Europe. This network, being a part of it, we know that we can program our help in a longer perspective, and we can keep it very effective. Thank you very much.
Na pewno nie ulega wątpliwości, że zdaliśmy egzamin.
Yes, it goes without any doubt that we passed this exam as a country, as a state,
a może przede wszystkim
but
jako społeczeństwo.
mainly as the society.
Ja trochę przewrotnie
So
dodam,
let
że
me
póki co
add
go zdaliśmy.
a provocative comment. We passed the
Nie można
exam
ukrywać,
so far,
że są też problemy.
because we cannot hide that there are problems on the horizon, and there are more and more of them. This number of problems can be increasing. Let me mention the end of the government subventions to accommodation for Ukrainian refugees.
Który w dodatku zbiega, ten koniec tych dopłat zbiega się w czasie z rozpoczęciem sezonu
End of subsidizing is coinciding also with the touristic regions. So all the centers, holiday resorts, private houses and hotels will be wanting to get rid of the refugees as soon as possible, because you can earn much more on tourists than on refugees. So aren't we heading to a homelessness crisis or education exclusion crisis? Because according to the estimates of NGOs, many children, especially older children, teenagers, are not attending schools in Poland still. We also hear about huge lacks in psychological assistance. So maybe we are sitting on a bomb. Is the government aware of those challenges and threats, and are humanitarian assistance organizations taking it into account? Minister, to answer directly whether we are facing the challenge of homelessness, no, it is not a threat. Let me assure you of one thing. The government is aware
w jaki sposób to
of what it's doing, and we know how to do it. The information that we have about the end of subsidizing, about this phasing out this 40 zlotys daily subsidy for giving accommodation to Ukrainians, this is not very true. We will be continuing assistance in this regard.
miejsca
The government is also preparing places, or has prepared places,
cały czas czekają, gdyby
that are waiting
jakiś kolejny ruch, prawda,
for
ze strony
other
ze strony Putina.
waves of immigrants if Putin does something unexpected, or, for example, waves of immigrants from Belarus. We are prepared. We have secured accommodations for all those people in need.
Pamiętajcie państwo, ten rząd nie zagrał
Let me add you, this government has never failed when it comes to the people in need. This government always took care about the people in need, and now who is in need these are Ukrainians. So I wouldn't say that we are threatened by the crisis of homelessness.
braku przedłużenia
This information about phasing out this 40 zloty subsidy,
na celu zakończenia
it is
wspierania
not
obywateli Ukrainy.
this phasing out is not aimed at
Obywateli będzie się usamodzielniać.
stopping to support Ukrainians. We want them to become independent a bit, but they will not be left to themselves. They will not be left behind. We will help
Potrzebują
everyone
więc
depending on the needs. So we are not afraid of the challenges you mentioned.
jakiekolwiek wykluczenie, tak naprawdę
Whether we are
jakiekolwiek
facing a threat of exclusion in any area of life,
że nie, bo
for the time being, I would say no.
dzieci, które
Children who
czy to przedszkole,
could use the
szkole średniej,
care and assistance and education in kindergartens, schools, any educational institutions,
są informacje o tym, że
it is available to them. They can use that. If we have an information that some small percentage
przez organizacje pozarządowe
of children
z tej nauki
that only small percentage is using these
uczą się zdalnie.
opportunities, this is for sure because due to the fact that they are following remote learning provided by the Ukrainian state. Polish institutions are adapting to the needs of Ukrainians accordingly, especially to the needs of children who need access to education. So I wouldn't panic here, I would be calm. For sure, there will be challenges, but our government is working on it on a constant basis, cooperating with local authorities, with NGOs. We are not doing that alone. Let's remember that even the law, the act on assistance to Ukraine, was not decided once for all. We are adapting it and adjusting it every now and then. Every time when a problem or a challenge appears that we can solve, then the government sits at the table together with NGOs, with local authorities, and we amend the act, or we prepare other regulations that will allow us to support and provide assistance to Ukrainians, to those who want to use that support. Thank you. I would be surprised if the representatives of government said that we are not prepared, so I expected such an answer. And now let me say, check. I will give the floor to the NGOs, PAH and Caritas. I want to hear your frank response. Do you share the optimism of the minister?
Co do zasady wierzę, że rząd będzie
So,
usiłował ze wszystkich swoich sił stanąć na
We
wysokości
do
zadania.
think that the government, we do believe that the government will do everything possible to help Ukrainian citizens to avoid the homelessness crisis. There are some dignity issues that we can't forget. The centers that you mentioned,
To są miejsca,
the
gdzie
accommodation
są
prepared,
łóżka
these are places where there are
można
beds
postawić swoje rzeczy, ma się
and you
dostęp
have
do sprzętu,
some
żeby się
space to
umyć.
put your belongings. You can wash yourself, but you have no possibility to spend time privately, in privacy,
W
individually.
związku z tym, te centra nie powinny
Those
być
centers
rozwiązaniem na pewno,
shouldn't be
w żaden
considered
sposób długofalowy.
as a long-term solution.
My będziemy rozważać na
We
pewno
will
ze
be
swojej
considering
strony,
from our
będziemy
side,
wchodzić w tą dyskusję na
we will
temat
be entering
udzielania pomocy typu cash for rent,
to this discussion
czyli
about
pieniądze
cash
na
for
wynajem,
rent
tak, by
solution,
osoby z Ukrainy mogły
so that Ukrainians
samodzielnie poszukiwać miejsca
would be able to look for a place to rent on their own, to rent a
takich
room
miejsc, które pozwolą im
or a
swobodnie,
flat
egzystować.
where they will be able to
Jednocześnie,
exist
myślę, że
calmly,
dużym problemem, jakimś
independently.
takim ogromnym problemem jest
I
to,
think
że,
that a major problem
większość
here
osób,
is
którzy
that most
przybyły do
of the
nas
people
z
who came to us from the
to są
Ukraine,
kobiety,
these are women,
niejednokrotnie z dziećmi.
very often assisted with
Bardzo często z
children.
dziećmi. Jest to ogromny problem z tego powodu, że
This is a
jeżeli
challenge
będziemy-
because
jeżeli chcemy tą
if
ogromną ilość osób
we want
włączyć
this
do rynku
huge
pracy,
mass of
podczas
people
gdy
to
te osoby
integrate them to the
posiadają dzieci,
labor
musimy
market,
zapewnić
and these are women with
ogromną
children,
systemową opiekę
we have
nad
to
tymi
provide
dziećmi,
a systemic
tak,
care for the
żeby-
children,
żeby te osoby miały ten czas wolny, bo
so
inaczej
that they
one
have
są-
free time,
Ja
so
mam
that they are
córeczkę,
available to work. I have a 2-year-old daughter,
Te osoby są po prostu,
and I know that
uwieszone,
without
że
that,
tak powiem, te dzieci są uwieszone
those
na
children
swoich
are
mamach.
really
Zwłaszcza, że to nie są pełne rodziny w tej chwili, to są kobiety z
dominating
dziećmi,
the,
samotne
the
kobiety.
person,
Bez
a
względu
single
na to, czy mają
mother,
dzieci, czy nie.
regardless
Aktualnie
of
sytuacja,
whether
kiedy są
she
w
has a
Polsce,
husband or not,
nie ma tego
when she is in
wsparcia,
Poland without assistance of
drugiej
another
osoby.
adult person,
Wobec czego
she cannot work.
bardzo ważne jest zapewnienie takiej
So what is important
bardzo silnej opieki
is to provide
przedszkolnej
a
i
massive,
szkolnej dla
well-organized preschool and school
dzieci.
care
W tym właśnie
for those children.
wymiarze, gdzie te osoby, tak by te osoby mogły
So that
podjąć się trudu pracy
their mothers
i
can
utrzymywać się. To ma
can
ponownie
work
aspekt
and
godnościowy, bo
earn
my
their
możemy
living, and
rozdawać
this is
pieniądze
necessary for their
jeszcze
dignity,
długo,
because
tak
we
jak
can
wszyscy
distribute
tutaj
money for a
zauważyliśmy,
long time.
hojność,
As we
Polaków
said,
była bardzo
generosity
duża,
of Poles is
ale myślę,
enormous,
że
but
godnym jest, by
dignity requires for anyone who wants to earn their life to be independent, to be able to do that, not to be reliable and dependent on others, other people. It's good that we have low unemployment rate, but there is another challenge. We have a very specific profile of people who came, and it will be difficult to integrate them to the labor market.
Jakie osoby z Ukrainy żeśmy zatrudniali?
Comparing to the type of people from Ukraine that we employed so far. This was a different profile. We looked for men for construction sites, and now we have millions of women and children. This is another totally different social group that has to be addressed and integrated in a completely different way. There will be other segments of the labor market. This is an enormous challenge, and I believe the government will address it, will try to address it.
Ja zgadzam się z moim przedmówcą, ale chciałbym też powiedzieć, że skala
I agree with what you have said, but I must also say that the scale of refugees we are seeing in Poland, the number of people is unimaginable, never seen in Europe.
nawet najbardziej
And
bogate
no country, even the most
nie stać jest
rich countries in Europe, would
pomaganie
not
przez
afford
lata w taki sposób, jak się to dokonuje
help
teraz.
for
Więc
years
tutaj, myślę, jest
at a
bardzo
scale
ważne
that we
też
can observe
orzecznictwo.
today. So it's also
Bardzo
very
ważna
important
jest rola Unii
to
Europejskiej.
for the
Wzięcie
European
też
Union to
tej
play its role
odpowiedzialności
Advocacy is very important, and taking the responsibility is also important because for the time being, the neighboring countries are taking this responsibility. The neighboring countries of Ukraine, especially Poland. So here we see a challenge for us, for the Caritas network, for us to be the advocates of the authorities of our countries. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much.
Myślę, że jednym z największych problemów
I think that one of the
tej
major
aktualnej sytuacji
problems
jest to,
in the
że
current situation
wojna w Ukrainie wciąż
is
trwa
that
i na
war in
dobrą sprawę
Ukraine is still going on.
nie mamy pojęcia, na jakim etapie
And in
konfliktu
fact,
i związanego z
we not know at which stage of the
kryzysu
conflict and
humanitarnego
of the humanitarian crisis that arises
jesteśmy.
from it we are.
Być może najgorsze już jest za nami,
Maybe the worst is already over,
niewykluczone, że
but it's not
Putin nie
excluded
powiedział jeszcze
that
ostatniego
Putin
słowa i
has
czeka nas
not
intensyfikacja
said his last word
konfliktu,
yet,
jego
and
rozszerzenie
that
być
the
może,
conflict
co za tym
would
idzie
get more
kolejna,
intense,
być może jeszcze
would be
większa
possibly
fala
enlarged,
uchodźców.
and
Czy
another wave of
bierzecie to
refugees,
pod uwagę?
even
Jak bierzecie to pod
bigger,
uwagę?
could arrive. Are you taking this into
Jak
account?
się do tego
How
przygotowujecie?
are
To myślę,
you
jest
bracing
pytanie,
for that? I think
zarówno
that's,
do pana ministra,
this
który częściowo
question
odpowiedział, ale także do
is to be asked to the minister, who has
UNHCR.
already answered to some extent, but also to the UNHCR.
Oczywiście, że rząd bierze to
Of
pod
course,
uwagę.
that the government is taking this into account.
Samorządy są
The
cały czas
voivodes,
w gotowości, jeżeli
the local governments
możliwe
are
zwiększenie
always ready for a possible
Ukrainy w związku z
growing
tym, że
influx of Ukrainians into Poland, especially given the fact that the places where they live, their homes will be threatened.
tutaj
Of course,
na
we
bieżąco
take this into
prowadzone
account.
spotkania są
So we
zbierane
have
dane na
daily
bieżąco,
meetings, we are collecting data, we are
gdyby nagle potrzeba
also
było
keeping
jakby tej puli
places
do zakwaterowania,
prepared for residential needs for those people should they arrive. And also the office for foreigners is also ready for that with the centers they have.
medyczną.
And they're also ready to provide medical services.
Zostaniemy zaskoczeni.
So we are certainly not going to be surprised by that.
Odnośnie tego, na ile
Concerning your
jesteśmy
question,
przekonani, to dalej
if we are convinced that it will be possible to go on with the support, well, we've got one positive thing here. We've got experience. All of us have acquired experience now, not only the government, but the whole Polish society is now accustomed, is now experienced in the help to a specific person, the Ukrainian citizen. We know who this kind of persons are, how to talk to them, that these are just humans like us. The Polish society is open and is going to continue to support, but I can also ensure that the Polish government is going to support the society as well. So we are ready, and the only thing for concerning which we can be afraid is a threat to Poland as such. We are going to support Ukraine as long as we can. Thank you.
Thank you once again. Let me connect maybe the two questions that you did, if it is possible, because I think building on some of the previous intervention of the speakers, briefly, I can give you an overview of the approach that we as UNHCR are having here. We launched 2 weeks ago the Regional Refugee Response Plans, the RRP. It's a mechanism of coordination to the response to the crisis. In this case, the chapter of Poland, but of course the RRP comprise the different neighborhood and countries that are receiving a large number of refugees. In the case of Poland, the fundings required for the response until December 2022 are 740 millions, and I would like to say we are glad because more than 60% of the RRP is already financed thanks to the donors community that is supporting the response here in Ukraine. Not only the embassies and the states, but also the private sector, local and international private sector that's very committed and above the general average of the fundings of the response. We estimate, and that was something that was said before, that more than 2 million of refugees from Ukraine will remain in the country by December 2022. Even when we are seeing pendular movements go and back to and from Ukraine. So it's a huge number. I don't want to repeat again that what was said before, but it's a huge number for every country. The RRP comprise the response, the activities, the projects of 87 partners, UN agencies, funds and programs, international and national NGOs, of course Caritas, Poland, and Polish Humanitarian Actions are part of the network, and some of the different actors are part of the response. And we are very glad to, as UNHCR, help to coordinate these activities to, and I think this is something that was mentioned just now, to build on the experience. Because it's not only the experience of the partners here, but also the experience that most of these organizations that are taking part of the RRP in Poland are bringing to the response. And in that sense, just two examples that connect the previous question with this one. We are moving, as UNHCR is implementing one of the largest in the world multi-purpose cash programs. This aims to reach 360,000 refugees from Ukraine. We reached more than 60% of this target for this year. Most, of course, of the beneficiaries of the cash support for 3 months align with the support that the Polish government provides to the nationals here, is received by women and children, and it depends on the composition of the family. That's the total amount that is received monthly. But the idea that I like to stress is that we are moving into a specific cash program. We started with these multi-purpose cash programs, but we think, as was mentioned, that we need to move into some specific programs, for example, for rent, for example, for child support, in case that it's not, and we need to move into establishing, and I think this is something connected also with the subsidies that you mentioned before, with establishing more specific criteria and understand what's the dynamic of the population in the country that can achieve self-reliance. That's, I think, is the objective that all we want. But of course, considering the particular vulnerabilities of some of the groups of the refugees population here. Finally, I think this is a kind of the added value that a plan like RRP could bring to work together with the government, because as I was said, we think that not every country in the world could deal with such a quick crisis in terms of movements of the population alone. So the relief, the humanitarian community, in this sense, is having this kind of discussions with national counterparts, with subnational counterparts, with the civil society, the charity organizations, about the development of a contingency plan. We are working in the crisis centers, the crisis areas of the different national Ministry of Interior, of course, but also the subnational levels, but also with all the partners to collect and to be prepared and build on this experience. So in this sense, I think the synergies between all the actors is something key based on the experience that we have achieved as far as these 3 months of the crisis move on. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo. I teraz takie pytanie
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to ask again a question to the helping organizations, but maybe also to the chairman of the PKO Bank. Is the help provided today getting to those in need, is it sufficient to fill their basic needs? Are the helping organizations sure that they are getting everywhere where the need is necessary, or is there a gray zone where we are not getting? How does it happen in practice? how do
Słyszałem, że właśnie
use
dużo
modern
jest takich
technologies?
nowatorskich rozwiązań,
Because there are
jakieś
many
tam i vouchery, karty
new
przypłacone.
solutions like
Jak
vouchers,
odbywa
like
się,
prepaid
jak
cards.
oceniacie obie strony
So
współpracę między
how do you assess
biznesem
on both
i
sides the cooperation
organizacjami
between
pomocowymi?
the business community and the helping
Pan
organizations?
prezes może niech zacznie.
Maybe the chairman could start.
Oczywiście jest tak, że tak jak to, co słyszymy, jakie organizacje zwracają się do nas.
Well, as far as we know, when various charity organizations are contacting us,
Tutaj siedzące obok, czy
there are huge organizations like the ones that are sitting next to me, but there are also some smaller ones, and there have been many attempts to provide help.
Najistotniejsze to nie jest tylko i wyłącznie
That's very important. It's not
siedzimy tutaj, rozmawiamy
only a discussion here among those representing big organizations, but there's also a local activity at the local level.
Ludzie w danym miejscu,
And that means that people in a given town
bardzo silnie rozglądać,
are trying very hard to look around them, to keep their eyes wide open. We've been already talking about eyes wide open, and they try to react whenever problems appear. Well, of course, not everybody is happy. The longer the crisis perdures, the more problems appear. For some of those who have been hosting Ukrainian families, there are some problems appearing now
właśnie tego miejsca pobytu.
with the change of the location in which they live now.
Istotny problem tutaj, myślę, też
So that's an important problem, I think.
Tego działalności tych organizacji.
From the point of view of those organizations, there are so many initiatives that they are very variable. It's not only about helping people looking for a flat, this is also about many initiatives trying to help the children, trying to help them on various levels. There are initiatives that we can see,
dom opieki w ciągu dnia,
like the foster care during the day,
ta mama miała możliwość zatrudnienia, ale czasami
so that the mom can work, but also so that the mom can have some free time. So that's a very simple initiative. There are also other initiatives aiming at the adaptation, places where kids can play together.
Tutaj też była mowa o tych aktywnościach związanych ze wsparciem psychologicznym.
There are also activities aimed at psychological support with leisure time for the mothers, free time for mothers.
Po prostu to życie osoby z Ukrainy, która właśnie ma
so that the life of a person from Ukraine with kids can be taken care of, so that this person could take also care of her hobbies, etc., and other activities. So this kind of support of a professional adaptation program is also taken care of by various NGOs.
Jakości życia, można powiedzieć.
From the point of view of quality of life, when someone can find a job, it's important to support such a person, because being independent for such a person is something that is better than functioning based on allowances, on external support. Therefore, helping those people, making them more independent, helping them to adapt to the situation, that's something that is always welcome. Minister Cieszyński has also prepared another approach, the internet formula.
Oferują swoje miejsca pracy.
Companies are offering jobs. They inform about the recruitment for a given position. And people from Ukraine have the possibility to place their CV in an anonymous form, so that there wouldn't be no GDPR problems.
Szukają pracowników, z drugiej strony właśnie
so there are announcements published by companies looking for employees, and there are also
właśnie w
posts
taką
published
aktywnością,
by
która
those looking
ma
for a
na
job.
celu właśnie,
So this kind of
wsparcie,
activities aim at supporting the process of seeking for jobs, so that more and more people could be independent, could
oznacza to, że
be
pewnie są jakieś
auto-financed.
osoby, które
So probably there are people who
gdzieś potrzebują jeszcze pomocy, ale
need
oczywiście
help somewhere out there,
tych
but
aktywności, tego co widzimy takim na pierwszej linii jest tak duże, że
there are so many activities and so many organizations on the front line now that I hope that most problems are being faced now. Thank you.
Ksiądz doktor?
Reverend,
Pan redaktor pytał też o to, czy pomoc dociera do wszystkich ludzi.
you have asked if help was
oczywiście my do
getting
wszystkich
to
nie jesteśmy
all
w stanie
people.
dotrzeć.
Well, of course, we are not able to
Jesteśmy w
get
stanie
to
dotrzeć
all
z tą
people.
pomocą taką
We are not
podstawową,
able
tą pomocą,
to
która
get with the
pozwoli
basic help to everyone,
przetrwać,
with
przeżyć,
the help that will
ale
make
też
it
musimy
possible
wybierać te grupy,
to survive.
do których
But
chcemy
we
tą
need to
pomoc
select
szerszą
the
dać.
groups
To są przede wszystkim
that
osoby
need
niepełnosprawne,
extra
to
support.
są osoby
Those are
starsze,
mainly
to są
disabled
matki
people,
z małymi
elderly
dziećmi.
people,
My
mothers
oczywiście
with
robimy
small
też
children.
pewne badania,
We are also
pytamy
performing
tych ludzi w naszych
research.
centrach, ich jest już ponad 30 w różnych
We've
miastach
got
w
more than
Polsce.
30
Co
centers
jest
in various cities of
naprawdę
Poland now,
najbardziej
and we are asking
potrzebne dla
their
was?
questions about
A
the
więc robimy też
most
badania
important
fokusowe.
things, about the most
Zdaje mi
needed
się,
things.
że,
So we are performing
Oczywiście
focus
mamy też takie
tests.
sytuacje, że ktoś jest niezadowolony,
And
że
of course,
przyszedł i
On
nie
some
otrzymał tej
occasions,
pomocy.
some people are not happy
Ale
because
no,
they
nie jesteśmy
came
w
and they
stanie
didn't get the help they
w
have
100%
expected, but we're not
zapewnić
able to
tego.
provide
Też jest bardzo ważne,
100%
myślę, w
of
tym,
what is
żebyśmy my
needed.
byli jako NGOsy i jako,
What is important for us as
też
NGOs
tutaj jakoś zmeczowane, żebyśmy nie mieli takich sytuacji, że ktoś
is
na
to
przykład
have a
idzie po
matching
pomoc
situation without
do różnych miejsc,
people
prawda?
going
Są
for
tacy
help to
specjaliści.
various places, because there are
Oczywiście
people
są pewne
specializing in that.
ale tak
Okay,
jest
these
w
are
każdym
exceptions, okay, but
społeczeństwie.
well,
Tutaj
this happens in
przede
every
wszystkim, jeszcze
society.
raz powiem, my nastawiamy się na pomoc dla tych grup
So what we want
najbardziej potrzebujących,
to do most is to
defaworyzowanych,
help
dla
the
niepełnosprawnych,
most
z
vulnerable
niepełnosprawnościami,
groups,
także
disabled,
intelektualnymi.
elderly, also
To
with
jest najtrudniejsze,
mental deficiencies.
wyzwanie
That's
na
the
pomoc
biggest challenge.
matkom z dziećmi małymi.
We are helping mothers with small children. Thank you.
Łukasz? Polska
Łukasz?
Akcja Humanitarna.
Polish Humanitarian Action.
No więc jeśli pan pyta, czy wszystkie potrzeby
If you
są
ask if
zapewnione,
all the needs are being provided for,
na pewno nie.
well, no, certainly not.
To znaczy te potrzeby, tak jak moi przedmówcy już powiedzieli,
As the other speakers
one
have
są
said,
bardzo różne.
the needs are variable.
My jeszcze pewne rozwiązania, które wprowadzamy, one potrzebowały
We are
czasu, żeby
implementing some
uzgodnić.
solutions
Jeszcze
and
miesiąc temu,
we
kiedy,
needed
dla
some time to
obywateli
discuss
Ukrainy
it.
bilety
1 month
na
ago, when
pociągi
the
były,
tickets, railway tickets
bezpłatne,
were free of charge for Ukrainians,
potrafili przyjeżdżać do nas do Przemyśla, gdzie rejestrowaliśmy
sometimes they came to
osoby,
Przemyśl, to the
na
place where we
właśnie
have been
ten
registering
tak zwany MPCA,
people for the
z
MPCA.
Gdańska,
People were coming from
co
Gdańsk.
wskazuje, że w Gdańsku czegoś brakowało,
So
skoro
this was
przyjeżdżali,
showing
owszem,
that
to było
something
za darmo,
was
ale
lacking in
ten
Gdańsk.
cały przejazd,
Because they
ale
arrived from
jaka
Gdańsk
to
to
odległość,
Przemyśl, that's
że
really
przyjeżdżać
far
do
away.
nas
Of course,
do
it was free of
Przemyśla
charge, but
i się
that's quite a
rejestrować
distance.
na
So
pomoc,
traveling
udzieloną
from
przez
Gdańsk
bank.
to Przemyśl in order to register for the
To się udaje. To się
PAH
zmienia. My się
aid
wszyscy
that was
rozwijamy. My się
quite long.
wszyscy koordynujemy.
So now
My
it's
się
getting
staramy
better and better. We are
duplikować.
coordinating our actions. We are trying not
Wymieniamy się
to
o tyle,
duplicate
o
our
ile też
actions.
Przepisy
So
pozwalają
as
tutaj,
far as the
mam na
regulations
myśli tak zwane RODO,
enable us to do
GDPR.
it, I'm talking about the GDPR regulations.
Staramy się dzielić informacjami
We
na
are
temat
trying to
tych
share
osób.
information on
To
those
jest
people.
skądinąd trudne zagadnienie, bo to są
That's
właśnie
a
ochrona
difficult
danych
topic
osobowych
because
nas,
that's about
bardzo często
data
nam,
protection and
wiąże ręce.
more often than not our hands are tied, but
Natomiast staramy się robić tak, żeby
we
ta
are
pomoc docierała
trying
najszerzej i najgłębiej jak
get
się
the
da.
help where it is needed as
po pierwsze,
deeply
to
as
nadal
possible,
wymaga
but
czasu
it
i
still
rozwoju
requires
od nas.
time, it still requires
To po pierwsze. Po drugie,
development on our side,
prawdopodobnie
and
nie uda
secondly,
nam się
we'll
100%
probably never be
tych
able to
wszystkich potrzeb
provide for
zapewnić.
100% of the needs
Zwłaszcza biorąc pod
that are out
uwagę,
there,
że
especially
niektóre
given
z
the
tych
fact
potrzeb
that
są dosyć
some of them are quite specific,
Na pewno
quite
jakby się
complicated,
skupiamy na tych najbardziej
and we are
tak zwanych
concentrating on
wegetatywnych
the most
potrzebach,
vegetative
zapewnienia
needs, as we
schronienia,
call them. So shelter,
zapewnienia pożywienia,
food,
edukacji, tych
education,
najbardziej bazowych,
the
podstawowych
most basic things,
potrzebach,
the most basic needs,
zapewnienia również pomocy psychologicznej.
and psychological
Także
help too.
powiedziałbym, że jesteśmy w drodze do tego, żeby
So
być
I may say that
lepszymi,
we are
natomiast
on our way in order to
osiągniemy
be more efficient, but we are never going to achieve 100%. We are never going to live in an ideal scenario. We will try to improve it. We'll try to
Dziękuję.
do for the
A
best.
jak jest z naszą
Thank you.
gotowością na taką pomoc?
And how is it with
bardziej
our
długofalową?
readiness for a long-term help?
Mimo, że pan minister tak ładnie
The
opowiadał o
minister
tym,
said long
ukraińskim dziecku, które się
about this
pyta,
Ukrainian
kiedy
child
wrócimy do domu, swojej mamie.
asking his mom when will be going home. But apart from that, I think Martin Lettieri will confirm that the international experience shows that the longer a conflict lasts, the more refugees would stay in the country where they have this temporary stay, this temporary asylum. They don't go back to their country because there is nothing to go back to, or the children are already integrated in the school and parents don't want to re-traumatize them again, to extract them from this new environment and transfer again. So according to some studies I saw, even a half of refugees who found accommodation in a new country stays there. So how are we prepared as a society, as NGOs, as the state, to this long-term integration of refugees in Poland? The minister? First of all, it's difficult to refer to any study of a long-term perspective for the people who came from Ukraine, because those 110 days is too short a time to say with certainty that after 100 days of stay in Poland, someone wanted to go back to Ukraine or to go to another country and decided to stay. It's too early to say. I often talk to those people who came. Very often I talk to mothers who say that after a week they wanted to stay in Poland. After another week they wanted to go to another country. Some of them left for another country and then came back to Poland. Not because life in Poland is better, but it's closer to their mother country. Of course, some of them will stay, and we are ready for that. We will accept them with pleasure, even as the state. Let us remember that until 24th of February, the Ukrainian community in Poland was really big. We had 300,000 people with residence permit. 700,000 visas were distributed every year for Ukrainian citizens. And the jobs registered for Ukrainians in labor agencies every year was in number of more than the million, 1.4 million. So we were used to that. We had this big community, and it will not be a problem to Poles, especially now when we are so integrated. We will be able to provide help to them. What is important for the future, what we see already in the statistics, more than 200,000 people are already working. This is different type of work. These are sometimes civil law contracts, but those people get employed. They are usually, very often, these are mothers who do work. They help one another with taking care of children, but also they use help of kindergartens and NGOs with taking care of children. What is important is 200,000 of people working it is a big number because 2 million are the people who are still on the move, who either went back or moved to other countries. We have to take it into consideration that for those 2 million, we were just a transit state. 1,100,000, 1.1 million registered for the PESEL number, national statistical number. So we see that 40% of adults entered the labor market, those who were able to. The Ministry of Social Work is activating professionally those people, helping them to get involved, to get integrated in the labor market. So this preparedness to having a part of Ukrainians for a longer stay is there. We are prepared for that. We realize that some of them will stay. And we are responding accordingly, preparing the labor market to their needs. As previous speakers said, it is very important to provide dignity to them, to make them able to afford their living, to make their living on their own, to earn money on their own, to provide care for the children so that they can work, so that they can feel this agency and independence of earning their life. Thank you.
Dziękuję. I don't want to repeat what was clearly said, just maybe to focus in other approach to the question that is the contribution that refugees make to in protracted or mid or long-term situations. Because yes, a lot of studies show that refugees contribute to the development of a society. And not in general terms, also in general terms, but very concretely, quantitative economics research has shown that if the dynamics of the populations are well managed in a 360 approach coherently by the different actors committed to the response, the refugees contribute to the growing of the GDP, of the different service areas of the one economy, and it creates, but paying taxes, by doing entrepreneurships, but occupying or filling some of the highly and also not so highly need of professional skills. So I think this is something important to have into mind. Yes, also why not to learn about different experiences where refugees have stayed for many months, but also for years in some countries, in mid and developed countries, contributing to the local economy. Also, in connection with the economy, about the decentralization, because we have seen in the last years the concentrations in urban areas of national and populations of refugees and migrants. But at the same time, we need to continue, and we are engaged in some of these conversations with some cities here in the north, in the west, in the east part of Poland, in the southeast too, about the importance of creating opportunities for the refugees to stay in some of the mid and small cities in the country, and not to concentrate and maybe sometimes exceed capacities, maybe in terms of education, of health care in the larger cities in the countries. So I think this is something important to take into account when we talk about mid and long term. And also, yes, more in general terms, the diversity that the refugee population create and apport to contribute to a society. Because intercultural diversity, gender diversity, in all are these aspects that in the mid and long term, if are well worked, we work towards integration, inequality, considering diversities and particular vulnerabilities, creates better societies. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo. Już ostatnie pytanie.
Thank you
bo
very
7
much.
minut
Last
na
question, because we are 7 minutes late already.
Cała Polska pomaga
Whole
Ukrainie.
Poland is helping Ukraine because
Jest to fakt.
we will admit, it goes without any doubt. What about other crises?
Organizacji
This is a question to the NGOs.
Bo czy nie zapomnieliśmy o innych
Haven't we
potrzebujących?
forgotten about other people in need, both in Poland and abroad? I can imagine that now it's much more difficult to finance for Caritas or BH to finance charity missions in Yemen,
Koncentrujemy w tej chwili na Ukrainie.
Sudan or somewhere else, because we are all focused on Ukraine. And also it goes the same for help in Poland. I have been in contact with many charity organizations who now have huge problems in fundraising for homeless, local homeless Polish people. All money that was given to them now is spent on the Ukrainians. How does it look like from your perspective?
Tak. Jest to ogromny
Indeed,
problem.
it is a challenge.
To znaczy, jeżeli organizacje pozarządowe polskie, że tak powiem,
If
nie wskoczyły
Polish NGOs
na ten temat Ukrainy,
are not
zostały przy swoich
busy with Ukrainian subjects and they stayed with their traditional field of expertise, now they will be having problems in fighting for funds, that's for sure. And when it comes to my organization, Polish Humanitarian Action, PHH, absolutely we see this challenge. For us, two main troubles are on the horizon. The first one is that the funds in other regions of the world are now dramatically dropping, decreasing. Let me quote the example of Somalia, which is now expecting a hunger catastrophe this year because for the second year in a row it isn't raining, and those shepherds in the deserted areas are keeping their camels. Yes, those are resistant animals, resistant to lack of water, but they can't resist for 2 years. So this hunger in Somalia will go beyond any expectations this year. It is incomparable with what we have here, because there are tens of thousands of people threatened by death because of hunger. The funds there increased a bit, but this specific crisis will be deeply underfunded. And the same goes for our other regions, other places in the world where we have our missions, and they signalize to us that they are not getting new projects, new grants. Those missions ask us for support, financial support, more often. In the meantime, before they get new money from the humanitarian system. But there is no money in the humanitarian system, not enough money. We are supporting them. On the other hand, there is this second dimension. I think most of us heard about this, about those crops that are blocked in Ukraine, and because of that, we are facing hunger, especially in the least developed states. So there is not enough money, and the hunger is increasing.
Prognoza jest bardzo pesymistyczna dla krajów Afryki.
So the forecasts are really pessimistic for Africa, but not only, also for the Middle East.
Jak będzie najbliższy rok,
when it comes to the 1 or 2 years to come, how they will look like, how this time will look like, with those two factors coinciding, the decrease in funds, because the funds are focused on Ukraine, and on the other hand, this world food crisis caused also by that war.
Jeżeli chodzi o Caritas, to
When it comes to
myśmy
Caritas,
w Polsce nie zamknęli
we
żadnego z
haven't
projektów.
closed
Mamy kilkadziesiąt
even one
i
of
skierowany do
projects that we have in
bezdomnych,
Poland. We
do
have
seniorów,
dozens of projects
do dzieci, ale to jest
addressing
możliwe
senior
tylko właśnie dzięki tej współpracy
citizens, children,
z
homeless
biznesem,
people.
z
But this is
bankami.
possible only due to the cooperation with the
Jeżeli chodzi
business,
o
with banks, with
zagraniczne
companies.
nasze
When it comes to
projekty,
our international
no to
projects,
oczywiście obawiamy się tego, co może być za
we are
jakiś czas,
of course
ale na
afraid
przykład
of what
nasz
can happen in the
projekt,
future. But for
który-
example, the project
który
that we
realizujemy
are running
w Kolumbii i
Colombia and
Wenezueli,
Venezuela,
zwiększyliśmy
we increased it
ostatnio o 100%.
by
Ale
100%
było to
recently.
możliwe tylko
It
dlatego,
was only
że
possible
pracujemy właśnie wspólnie z Jeronimo
thanks to the
Martins,
cooperation with Jeronimo
Biedronką,
Martins,
nie
the
tylko w
chain
kraju,
of
ale i
Biedronka
właśnie na tym pograniczu
supermarkets.
wenezuelsko-
We cooperate them not only
kolumbijskim i
in
teraz
Poland,
już
but
także w
also in the
regionie,
South
w regionie stołecznym.
America.
Ale oczywiście
in
obawy o to,
Venezuela.
jak to będzie dalej,
But of course,
są
there are
duże.
fears of how it will look
No
like
mówię, jeszcze
in
raz
the
się
future.
odwołam do tego,
Let me
że my
refer
mamy
once
ten
again
plus,
to
że mamy tą
saying
wielką
that
rodzinę
our
Caritas.
advantage is this
Poczynając od
big
Caritas
Caritas
parafialne,
family, this network,
poprzez
the
Caritas
cooperation
diecezjalne
with
tutaj w
parishes,
kraju.
with dioceses,
I my też
here in
zmieniliśmy
Poland
bardzo oblicze
and internationally. So we
Caritas, bo
also
to, co
changed
jest
the
bardzo
face of
ważne, bo
Caritas
jednak
to a great
nie
extent. Because what is
porzucając
important
swojej
now
misji,
that
ale ważne jest, żebyśmy
we
byli
can
profesjonalni.
act
Dlatego
without
działa tutaj u nas
giving
bardzo
up on our core
nie
missions.
taki najmniejszy
This
nawet,
is
a nie
about
największy
professionalism.
zespół fundraisingu.
We have a very big,
Ale też informujemy o tym, co
quite
robimy.
big
I
fundraising
widzimy,
team,
że
and we
jak
are
jest ta informacja, dochodzi, to
communicating
ci
about our
darczyńcy
activities.
dają bardzo często ten wdowy
And the
grosz.
donors
No i jeszcze raz
hear
wspomnę
of what
o
we
sieci,
do,
o Konfederacji Caritas
and they provide
Internationalis,
funds.
Caritas Europa.
Let me
Tylko
mention,
w
of
tej
course, the
wspólnocie,
international
tylko
network
we
Caritas
współpracy
Internationalis,
możemy
Caritas
dalej
Europe.
rozwijać
Only
się
through
i
cooperation
pomagać przez
will
to,
we
bo to
be
jest
able
nasza rola, nasz
to
cel,
help
pomagać tym
others. And
najbardziej
this is our mission.
potrzebującym.
This is our
Jeszcze Martin Letieri.
reason of being. Martin Letieri, you wanted
Thank
to add
you.
something?
Just one brief comment. I'm being Latin American. I'm totally aware of the fantastic work that Caritas Polski is doing in Venezuela and Colombia and with the Venezuelan crisis. And of course, the need of increase of the support to all the crises around the world is obvious at this moment because we are really in some crises running out of enough funding to cover basic needs, life-saving interventions. We sadly need to say that we commemorate next 20 June, the World Refugee Day. And this is a day where we reflect about the situations, but just like a brief comment, some months ago, the High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, addressed the Security Council and he said, even if we get enough funding, even if the humanitarian community is ready and stand to respond, if we do not address the causes of the different crises, the war, the root causes that creates the movement of refugees, we are not in a position to address all the needs, the humanitarian basic needs that are around the world. So it's also important to work together, coordinated towards address the causes of the massive displacement that we are seeing now, that sadly now we overcome this for the first years in decades of the 100 million of persons fleeing from their places of origin. And I think this is something that we always need to keep in mind in our interventions. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję wszystkim panelistom.
Thank you very
Mam
much. I
nadzieję, że
thank
udało
all
się
the
nam trochę
panelists. We
przybliżyć,
hope that we were able
to, co
to
Polska robi
discuss a bit
kontekście
and familiarize you a
wojny
bit
w
with
Ukrainie,
what Poland is
kryzysu
doing,
humanitarnego
facing
związanego.
this humanitarian
związanego.
crisis caused by the war in
Teraz
Ukraine.
zostaną Państwo zaproszeni na przerwę kawową.
We will now
a po
have a
przerwie
short
ponownie
coffee break,
zapraszam
and
na
after
panel
the break,
poświęcony
we
bardziej
will
takiemu
be talking
kontekstowi
again. The
międzynarodowemu.
second panel will focus more on the international dimension of this crisis. Thank you very much.
Dziękujemy wszystkim gościom. Teraz zapraszamy Państwa
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Now we will have a short coffee break and time to discuss
tylko basa pierwszego streamu.
Szanowni Państwo, proszę zabierać miejsce.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your
Take
seats.
your seats. We are going to start for a moment. Dobrze, zaczynamy po przerwie kawowej. Mam nadzieję,
Okay,
że
let's
wszyscy
start after
Państwo
the coffee
trochę
break.
odpoczęli, zrelaksowali się.
I hope
pysznej
that
kawy,
you have
zjedli coś
relaxed and
słodkiego.
have drunk some
And
good
remember,
coffee
if you want to
and have
hear
eaten something
the
good.
English translation on your devices, please choose the number 2. Przechodzimy do panelu drugiego naszego
We are now
forum
moving to the second
obywatelności,
panel of our
który jest
charity forum,
zatytułowany
the title
Partnerstwo
of
Polskiej
which is
Społeczności
the
Międzynarodowej w
Partnership
obszarze
of
pomocy
Poland and of the
humanitarnej
international
dla Ukrainy.
community in the field of
Serdecznie zapraszam
humanitarian
Tomasza,
aid for
naszego
Ukraine. I am
moderatora.
inviting
Przekazuję
Tomasz,
głos i
our
poproszę o
moderator.
prowadzenie
I am
kolejnego
handing
panelu
over the
dyskusyjnego.
mic. Please moderate the next panel.
Dzień dobry, ja serdecznie zapraszam naszych panelistów
Good
o
afternoon. I am inviting our panelists
zabranie miejsca
to take their places,
i zaraz
their
wszystkich
seats,
przedstawię.
and I'm going to present them in a moment.
Więc nasz drugi panel
Our second panel is entitled Partnership of
Społeczności Międzynarodowej w
Poland
obszarze pomocy
and of the
humanitarnej dla
international
Ukrainy.
community, key partners in the Ukraine humanitarian response.
Nazwaliśmy go po prostu panelem międzynarodowym.
The international panel, as we call it internally, the first panel was concentrated on what happened in Poland,
Tym razem
on how
próbujemy
Poland
spojrzeć
responded to the
na
crisis. Now
wojnę w
we are
Ukrainie
going
i związany z
to
nią
try
kryzys
to look at the
humanitarny troszkę
war in
bardziej
Ukraine
globalnie.
and the humanitarian crisis it generated on a more global scale.
Wiaczesław
I've
Grynewicz,
got here
dyrektor
Father Vyacheslav
Caritas
Grynewicz, director of Caritas Spes,
Tetiana Stawiczny,
Tetiana
dyrektor Caritas
Stawiczny,
Ukraina,
director of Caritas Ukraine,
Maria Nyman, sekretarz
Maria
generalny
Nyman,
Caritas Europa,
General Secretary of Caritas Europe,
pan Grzegorz Kozłowski,
Mr. Grzegorz
dyrektor
Kozłowski,
Departamentu Ceł w
Director
Ministerstwie
of
Finansów,
Department of
a
Customs
także
at the
mamy,
Ministry of Finance,
za pośrednictwem
and we've
wideokonferencji
got also
połączenie
via
z
video
panem
conference
Davidem Tomasem, który jest
a connection of
kierownikiem
Mr.
programu
David Thomas,
Światowego Programu Żywnościowego w Ukrainie
who is
i łączy
chief
się z nami z Kijowa.
at the World Food Program of the UN and is contacting us from Kiev.
Najwyraźniej nas słyszy. W związku z tym możemy rozpocząć
He is
rozmowę.
hearing
Więc,
us, so we can
no
move
ponownie,
on
mamy 110
and
dzień
start our
wojny,
discussion. So
w
once again,
Ukrainie.
it's been 110
I nie
days.
da się
The war in
ukryć, że
Ukraine is
wojna ta,
lasting, and we cannot hide the
ogółu
fact
społeczeństwa, zarówno w Polsce, jak i
that
w
in
Unii
Poland
Europejskiej,
and in the
no
EU,
tak, można powiedzieć, troszeczkę spowszedniała.
this war is something that
Zaczęliśmy się do niej
became more common.
przyzwyczajać.
We got accustomed to it somehow.
Oswoiliśmy ją sobie, być może ją po prostu
So it's
wpychamy
So
trudno po prostu
today we are
znając po
maybe
sobie,
pushing
wiedząc
it
na
away
początku
from
tej
our
wojny,
minds.
to
Even if I look at
budziłem się
myself,
kilka
at the
razy
beginning
w
of the
ciągu
war,
nocy, żeby
I
sprawdzić
was
doniesienia z
waking
linii
up
frontu.
several
Ale nie
times
można tak żyć, trzeba
during the night to
wrócić do
check the
codziennych
news
zajęć.
from the front line, but it's not
Niemniej
possible to
jednak fakty
do it
są
all the
takie,
time. You need
że
to
ta
get
wojna
back to
wciąż trwa.
your ordinary
Do Doniecka
duties,
w linii prostej
but
z Warszawy jest
the war is still
niecałe
on.
1200 km.
Donetsk is 1,200 kilometers from Warsaw, so 1,200 kilometers from here. Bombs are falling and people are dying. We know from the media that somewhere there in the east of Ukraine, Russia is still attacking and the Ukrainian army is defending itself very bravely. But what does it mean in practice? What is the situation in the field? How is the everyday work of Caritas Ukraine like? Can you act on the whole territory of the country? What are the main challenges today? What are the main problems?
Pani Tatiana, niech.
Tatiana, could you start, please?
Sure, thank you. So, as you all may know, Caritas throughout the world is a local organization. Yeah, we're a localized organization, so both Caritas Spes and Caritas Ukraine have centers throughout the country, an entire network. So when you talk about the differences of being far away or being close to the war, you can say that we have both. We have centers that are in Western Ukraine where maybe some of the tension has gone down a bit, although there are still regular missile strikes happening throughout the country. But there's more of a stabilization period happening. You still have, large numbers of IDPs. There's a lot of challenges that each of the local host community is facing to incorporate the local IDP population, to get them settled, put them in shelters throughout the region. We also have centers that are located in those areas where people are fleeing from the fighting. So we have about 6 centers that are catching the people who flee from areas of direct fighting. There's about 6 centers, and I can say in those 6 centers we've been providing that first hand, that first aid, that first catch, the first hug that comes when somebody comes from a war-torn area, to provide assistance, basic assistance, food, care, even just an ear to listen about what's happened, assistance to help them find shelter. So we're working on, as an organization, I can say that we're working on all fronts. There's also another section in the country which is newly liberated, the areas around in the Kyiv, Chernihiv, and Sumy oblast, where we're also addressing those needs. We're looking at questions of providing both shelter, food, the basic things that are needed in other parts of the country, but we're also starting to turn our attention to the restoration and rebuilding of homes and shelters.
I ksiądz Wieczesław?
Father Wieczesław?
Może po polsku będę mówił.
Maybe I'll speak Polish.
Tak będzie łatwiej dla mnie. Dziękuję.
It will be easier for me.
Naprawdę,
Okay, of course.
sytuacja wojny, ona dotyczy
Well,
nie
the
tylko
situation of war
zewnętrznych
is not
zniszczeń,
only
które
about
widzimy, ale też dotyczy
destruction that can be seen out there, but it's also about 3 things inside people.
które też posttraumatyczny
The
syndrom, ale też
psychological
sprawy duchowe, bo na przykład
damage
jeżeli
and also spiritual
tak,
damage,
to
because
myślę,
if we
że my
talk
jako
about
chrześcijanie
forgiving, I think that we as
rozumiemy, że
Christians,
to
we
jest
understand
coś
that
głębszego.
this is something
I
deeper.
próbujemy na to odpowiadać.
We are
Nasza
trying to
specyfika,
answer that,
rodziny Caritas, że
and
współdziałamy z
Caritas
Kościołem, żeby
family
wyjść
has
do
got
człowieka
the specific
w różnych strefach.
character of
I to naprawdę, co
cooperation
jest
with
ciężko z
the church,
doświadczenia, tutaj się
so we are
pytało o
acting on
wyzwania,
various
to
levels.
spotkanie się
So what
ludzi,
was
którzy
difficult, the
byli w
challenges we
sytuacji
had
biedy
was
przed wojną,
meeting people who are
a
in a
wojna
situation
jeszcze
of
pogłębiła
poverty
tą
before the war, and the war
Takim
made this
przykładem
poverty
może
even
być,
bigger. Such an example
jedno z miejsc, które my
is a
odwiedzamy,
place that
też,
we are visiting,
projekt, który
and a project
dotyczy wspomagania materialnego,
that is about
w
material
sensie
support,
przydzielenia pomocy humanitarnej, ale też
humanitarian
zaczynamy trochę
aid,
odnawiać budynki, w
but we
sensie
are also starting to
wymienić szkło,
restore the buildings. We are replacing
dostosować
the glass in the
potrzeb
windows, the
normalnego życia.
roofs, and trying to
To jest
adapt
wioska
the
po
buildings
granicy z
to
Białorusią,
everyday life.
niedaleko
That's a
Czernobyla.
village not far from Chernobyl, close to the border with Belarus.
Ludzie byli jakby
After
zobowiązani,
Chernobyl
żeby
exploded,
zostawić to
people
miejsce, żeby
had to
wysiedlić.
leave the place. But they still stay there, and they don't really have the property rights for the apartment, so the state is putting this building at the disposal of those people. So now the war has come, the buildings were shelved, and now they don't have compensation for that, so people were not in a normal situation, and now it went even deeper. So this is what can be seen in many villages, in many places. A grandmother and a grandfather are raising a child, and the child doesn't know its mother, and we have met several such families in one village. So that's a very difficult situation, because you understand that the war didn't start on February 24th. The war started before. For the child, the war started, in fact, at the very beginning of its existence. So that's a very difficult situation. We are trying to respond, but we understand that we will not be able to match all those needs on our own. Because if there was a company which was working with Russia, for instance, we cannot do anything in order to restore the activity of such a company. For instance, a company was providing windows for Russia, and now the business model needs to change completely so that people could work again. That's a huge challenge, and it needs to be faced by many actors, the state, the NGOs. That's a common challenge. We need to think about the way in which we can solve this. That's a thing we're going to deal with for many, many years. Thank you very much. The war in Ukraine is not only dramatic to people who are directly impacted by the war. It's not only a drama for millions of Ukrainians, but it's also a threat of hunger worldwide, because Ukraine was one of the biggest producers and exporters of corn, of wheat, for instance. So now the production is impossible or very difficult in many places, but moreover, the supply chains, the export chains have collapsed. They were based mainly on the Ukrainian ports, which are currently blocked in the Black Sea. So I guess that the World Food Program has got already some forecasts concerning the consequences thereof for the Middle East, for Africa, Latin America, or the Caribbean regions. Those regions were in fact, the recipients of cereals from Ukraine. That's why I would like to ask our speaker from Kyiv about the situation we are expecting now. Are we going to face a humanitarian crisis at a huge scale? Is hunger awaiting us? And if so, when?
nie jest to zbyt, to jakby, jest to dość ponura perspektywa.
Well, that's
Moje
a very dim perspective.
pana dyrektora Grzegorza Kozłowskiego.
So I'd like to ask Director Grzegorz
Jak
Kozłowski,
wyglądają prace nad stworzeniem
how are
alternatywnych szlaków
works on the creation of alternative export routes going on? There were first attempts at that. I think that wheat from Ukraine has been transported by rail to Kołobrzeg and then loaded on ships, if I'm not mistaken. So what is the government's plan in order to streamline Poland as the corridor for the exports of food from Ukraine? Is it possible?
Szanowni Państwo,
Ladies and gentlemen, can you hear me?
pozwólcie, że ten komentarz mój będzie on tak naprawdę wynikiem spojrzenia
My
przez
comment
pryzmat
will be in fact the
zadań
result
Krajowej Administracji Skarbowej
of a vision from the
Departamentu CEU,
National
realizowany w obszarze
Customs Department of the National Administration
granicznym, w obszarze
in the
odpraw
field
celnych.
of borders,
Jak zapewne
of custom
wiecie i
operations.
obserwujecie to, co
As you know,
dzieje się w mediach, ale też
following on the media what's going on and also basing on the comment we just heard,
eksportu zbóż
the problem of exports of cereals is in fact something that appears every day in the mouth of many politicians,
pozarządowych.
NGOs.
Faktycznie jest tak, że żaden z krajów sąsiadujących z Ukrainą nie jest w stanie
In fact, the neighboring countries of Ukraine are not able to organize on their own the transportation of those huge, enormous volumes of cereals produced in Ukraine.
Odcięcie Ukrainy od portów morskich,
The cutting of Ukraine from its seaports is an enormous problem,
będzie generował
and it's going to generate a huge international crisis.
Polska również stara się wesprzeć Ukrainę.
Poland is also trying to support Ukraine in its
W
actions.
większości resortów, w resorcie infrastruktury, w resorcie
And in most ministries, at the Ministry of Infrastructure, at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, at the Ministry of Finance, works are going on in order to support those exports, to streamline them,
zboże wyprodukowane w Ukrainie
so that the wheat produced in Ukraine
przez Polskę
could be
transportowane do krajów
transported
potrzebujących.
via Poland to the countries in need.
Szerokim łańcuchem aktorów.
We've got here a huge range of actors involved, entities involved in this process, starting by entrepreneurs, by the business community, by the dispatching companies, the terminal operators, the transporting companies, and we've got also the government agencies in it, such as customs, such as veterinary controls, which need to perform their actions, they need to perform the controls resulting from the regulations. I would like to stress the fact that only cooperation between all those entities will make it possible for the transportation to be performed in a fluent manner so that the supply chains could work efficiently. Quite recently in Gdańsk,
odbyło się spotkanie poświęcone temu zagadnieniu.
there was a meeting dedicated to that topic. Very soon in Szczecin, during the Maritime Congress, we are going to discuss about the process, of exporting the wheat, how to streamline it. The truth is that the Polish ports are prepared from the point of view of infrastructure to send the cereals, the crops that were produced in Poland. So the Polish crops were exported, the volumes produced here were exported, and the needs were provided for. But now we are facing a huge challenge. So the port operators, the terminals are not sure, they're uncertain if they will cope with it. And they have articulated it during various meetings. When the conflict in Ukraine will stop, are the supply chains still going to go through Poland or not? Because massive investments are needed in order to answer to the expectations of our Ukrainian partners concerning the huge volume of crops. But this involvement needs to be common between all the actors. We are also trying to streamline the road border crossing points. We know that this is not the only way in which the crops are being transported. Of course, the most efficient way is to do it by railway, and that's the role of the Polish and Ukrainian Ministry of Infrastructure. Of course, the seaports needs to be used, but there's also some space for road transportation. So in Korczowa, Dorohusk, Hrebenne, Medyka, there are simplified corridors for wheat that have been organized. The phytosanitary services are also quite flexible, and so they dropped some requirements on weed control from Ukraine. When moving through Poland by transit and moving on to other countries, so the controls do not need to be performed anymore on that, so that the supply chain could work as fast, as good as possible, as well as possible. So we understand the problem, and we are discussing with our Ukrainian partners on streamlining those border crossing points, but without the involvement of the customs services, of the dispatchers who also have their place in this chain, it would not be possible to perform this huge endeavor. Thank you very much.
A lot is being said in Poland about our future participation in the reconstruction of Ukraine. It's good to have ambitious plans, but we still don't know where we are in this conflict. We have no idea when this reconstruction can be started. So let's focus on here and now, and let's talk about the government's plans towards Ukraine. During the last panel, we have discussed the help provided to Ukrainians who got to Poland. And what about Poland's help to Ukraine in the Ukraine? We know that we sent some military assistance. We know that Poland is a logistic hub for this military assistance. What about humanitarian aid? We know that needs are huge. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs recently said that it transferred charity organizations in Ukraine 3 million zlotys. It is not that much. So let us talk about what Poland is doing to help Ukrainians in the Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said, my comment will be limited to the customs authority perspective. So, as it has been said on numerous occasions now, we have mentioned support, and also we as the tax authority and customs authority, we also support Ukrainians who are in Poland. We help them to fill requirements, administrative and fiscal requirements. But as the service, as the authority, we also passed the exam, and we got an excellent mark when it comes to the support at the moment of the beginning of the war, on the 24th of February. Although we were somehow afraid of further aggression of Russia, but we were not accepting this thought. We were not
wspólnie ze Strażą Graniczną,
believing that it will really happen. So together with the customs services and the border guards,
rozmawialiśmy na temat
we
ułatwienia
have been preparing how to
migracją
prepare the procedures, how to
obywateli Ukrainy do Polski.
streamline the flow of
Większość,
massive
podejrzewam, z państwa
moves of
była na
migrants to
przejściach
Poland.
granicznych. Widzieliście
I
zaangażowanie
think that most of
wszystkich
you were
służb
on the
działających,
borders. You saw how
funkcjonariuszy
involved and
służby
engaged our
skarbowej,
voluntary
administracji skarbowej, Straży
workers
Granicznej,
and border guards
pomoc
and
poszczególnym osobom, obywatelom.
representatives of the administration, fiscal and customs administration, how we support Ukrainian
Uproszczone procedury
nationals,
w zakresie
how we
kontroli osób, w zakresie kontroli
facilitated
towarów,
different controls, different requirements on transporting goods,
przepustowość przejść i
luggage,
ta migracja
to
ludności
increase the
mogła
capacity of border crossing points,
bezkolizyjny. Rozumiejąc
so that
tragedię,
this
jaka spotkała
flow of people comes
obywateli, te osoby,
in a
które
seamless way
zdecydowały się, czy
to the extent
zmusiła ich
possible,
sytuacja do tego, aby
so that those people who are forced to cross the border because of the war
rola państwa polskiego
are able to come
jest
seamlessly.
ogromna.
Of course, here the role of the Polish state is huge, and the representative of the Office for Foreigners has already underlined
Od
that.
samego początku też wspólnie z
From the very beginning, together with the Chancellery of the Prime Minister,
Pomagam
we
Ukrainie,
also launched a program of helping
pomocy humanitarnej
Ukraine.
organizowanej przez różne organizacje pozarządowe. Została stworzona specjalna strona
This is a
dedykowana
dedicated website
organizacjom, mogły
dedicated to charity organizations where they can
tej pomocy, którą przekazują na Ukrainę, transportu,
have simplified procedure, customs procedure to transfer goods to Ukraine. The form that we have
dane z tego formularza od razu
prepared,
trafiają. Cały czas to działa.
the data that you put in the form are automatically transferred to two border crossing points in Dorohusk and Korczowa. This is the so-called avisation, and the
na tych przejściach mają już informacje o tym, że taki
guards at those crossing points are aware in advance that this convoy will be coming, and they are able to clear it quicker, and as a result it gets quicker to the people in need in the Ukraine. We also created a special email box
Otrzymywaliśmy naprawdę bardzo dużo pytań.
to which we got lots of questions, 50, 60 emails daily from different institutions and agencies wanting to facilitate those formalities and customs procedures for the organizations which help the Ukrainians. So thanks to
wszystkich kanałów informacyjnych, bo również krajowa informacja skarbowa była zaangażowana w to. Pozwoliło to na
responding to those emails and
przekazywanie
addressing
ogromnych ilości
challenges, it was possible to send those massive amounts of goods, of help with minimum formalities, with minimum requirements that have to be met. Thank you very much. Maybe let me be provocative a bit when asking, especially Maria Neyman, the Secretary General of Caritas Europe. Maybe it's time for a more corporate or business approach to helping. I'm referring to the split of tasks between different helpers, between governmental actors, states, organizations. Maybe it has to be said clearly. In Poland we have millions of refugees. Caritas Poland is only focusing on helping refugees in Poland. Let's do it efficiently. Let's concentrate all funds on this help. Our country can be a hub, can be a logistic platform, but let's leave helping in the Ukraine to other organizations or other states, because if everyone does everything, it is not very efficient, it is not very effective. We
ze
also
śpiworami, które
convoys
przyjechały
with
na polską
sleeping
granicę
bags
z
that came
Hiszpanii.
to Polish crossing
Myślę, że to można
points
byłoby
from
jakoś bardziej
Spain.
efektywnie wykorzystać jako pomoc.
I'm sure
bo
that it
to
could
nie
have
jest
been
chyba
done
do
more
końca
efficiently.
efektywne
So
robienie
this
tego
is not
typu
very
konwojów.
effective to do such convoys. What do you think?
Thank you. Yes, I think that coordination and working together is just essential. I think within the Caritas family, this is something that we have tried to ensure from the very outset, in the sense that there was already reference made to the fact that we are based on localization as one of our core values. We are a network based on subsidiarity, meaning that there is this very good knowledge of the context, of the realities on the ground in the countries. And as a network, we are in constant and permanent contact with one another. We have been working with Ukraine, we have been working with the neighboring countries as well, since long before the war started. So really from the 24th of February, when we came into this phase of the war, we were managing to be in contact from the very first moment. Our members in Caritas Ukraine, in Ukraine, both Caritas Best and Caritas Ukraine, had already this very good understanding and very good networks within the country and with the neighboring countries. And I think as Caritas, we are based on this methodology, which is See, Judge, Act. So we have tried since day one, and that's what we continue to try to do, to ensure that we are assessing where we as a network and where we as individual organizations and as diocesan Caritases, as local parish Caritases can fill a role. Where is there a gap that needs to be filled? And that's how we see our role, to ensure that we are trying to bridge these gaps and staying in contact. We have, I think in any kind of emergency, there is always this issue of coordination, which is important and sometimes challenging, and there have been challenges along the way, and there will continue to be challenges, I'm sure. But we have put in place a coordination mechanism, an emergency response support team, which is global, so it's confederation-wide, where we are trying to ensure that we have these specific expertises and specific contact points that all of the Caritases can go to ensure that we can, with our different expertise, our different possibilities, use the different opportunities and contribute in the most coordinated way. Because the response that has been to this crisis has been immense. We have heard that there has been an incredible solidarity and incredible support. We also know that needs are huge, so this support is definitely needed. So we have tried to support, but without overwhelming, and I think that has always been the balance, because our colleagues are in the midst of a war, our colleagues in the neighboring countries, which are doing just an exceptional work. You were seeing a little bit of what Caritas Poland has been doing. It's incredible. It's uncomparable. So ensuring that we can stay and being with you and supporting you throughout this, that has been our main focus all the time. Trying to be a point of coordination. I think that's where we as a confederation have a strength. And I think it's also something that we have seen at the Caritas Europa level. We have seen that this is also something that other actors have been seeing, that something in our way of working is right, because we have that presence already from the ground. We have that possibility to assess along the way and to ensure that we adapt our response. So seeing the needs, assessing them, and then acting and being ready to reassess along the way. So I'm sure there are issues along the way, but I wouldn't say that it as challenging as that. On the contrary, I think it has been incredible to see how well it has been working despite this conflict, the war, with all the consequences that there are, and with the long-term consequences that there will be. It's now, but we already have to assess the future as well and being prepared for the future. And that's something that our members that are in the midst of the war, they can also rely on others to accompany them in that, to be able to really reflect in advance, to plan the response with the different scenarios that there are, to re-evaluate along the way. So I think a lot of the coordination is going well, actually.
To w sumie częściowo odpowiada na moje kolejne pytanie,
This
które
partially
miałem
responds to
właśnie
my
do
next question
Caritasu.
that I had to the representatives of Caritas, but maybe our Ukrainian guests will be able to expand on this perspective. And the structure of Caritas is unique because on one hand we have horizontal parishes, dioceses, the national level. Additionally, we have Caritas Europe. On the top of it, Caritas Internationalis, and we have two Caritases in Ukraine.
Czy to nie jest handicap? Czy
Isn't it a burden or a handicap that in such operations, such activities, you have two organizations in Ukraine?
Jak wygląda wasza współpraca?
How do you cooperate? Isn't there any overlap, or maybe you have thought of uniting because there must be some duplication?
Maybe I'll take the first shot at answering your question. So, first of all, I want to say that the needs in Ukraine are so great that actually it's a good thing. I think that we have two Caritas that are working to respond to the immense number of the needs. I think also in the past we had a different way of approaching our ministry, the way that we worked in Ukraine, and I think that way was complementary. Yeah, it was not overlap. Yeah, and I think now we're moving towards a more organized way of responding because the humanitarian crisis is so great, and humanitarian work requires organization, it requires standards, it requires methodologies that are across the board. Yeah, and I think that in that way we are moving closer together already. We saw from our presentations yesterday that we're working in a similar way with the way that we handle our monitoring, evaluation, the way we're assessing situations, the way that we're looking at the reporting, and I think that it's very complementary. I think that we're going to continue to look for places where we intersect and where we can build a common platform to make sure that the response that we're giving in Ukraine is as strong as possible and that it's helping as many people as possible.
Dziękuję też za to pytanie. Tak naprawdę myślę, że to
Thank you for the question. Yes, I also think that this is a richness. Ukraine is a huge state, the biggest in Poland, in Europe, sorry. So two organizations of Caritas, this is a richness, because every human being is different, and in some regions, Catholic Church is more popular in some Orthodox Church. So this is an opportunity to access more people. When we talk about this emergency response, here, of course, our help is overlapping. This is the same kind of help. This is providing shelter, providing food. But the history of our organizations may differ, but I also think that we enrich one another. Of course, the question always remains about the more deeper cooperation, and I think this crisis time, this solidarity time, will also provoke some ideas to unify, to cooperate more intensely. So I think this is a richness. Thank you very much. Next question, also probably not an easy one. I see one absent here. What about Caritas Russia? What is going on there? Do you have contacts with Caritas in Russia? Is there any cooperation between you? Are they active on the other side of the front line? Because there are needs as well.
Yes, there are needs as well. And Caritas Russia is one of our members. We have 49 members in 46 countries. It's really all of Europe that is present within the network. They are a member as another, and indeed they have needs. So we do have contacts with them, but obviously, as you will know, meeting them, for example, is very difficult for the time being with the travel restrictions and so on. So we are having virtual meetings. We are trying to ensure that we get the information that we can from their side. They are sticking very much to their mandate, which is a humanitarian mandate, to continue to support the people in need. They are continuing with their services. They can continue with their services. They are struggling in many ways, but they also know that they have a network to rely on, and that's our Caritas network, and that's the richness in our Caritas network. We know yesterday Father Vyacheslav was saying that it has felt like a family for you, and I think that's what we want it to be. We are a family. If one of the members of the family is struggling, the other members of the family are there to support. So that's what we want to do. Obviously, as the Caritas Confederation, we have a humanitarian mandate, and we are very keen to stick into that humanitarian mandate. We are not entering into the politics. We are, seeing the need and meeting the need. That's our role, and that's what they try to do. That's what we try to do, and that's what we will continue to do.
To jeszcze bym prosił o kilka słów wyjaśnienia, jak
Maybe a couple of words of explanation. How does the work look like, the work in the European Secretary?
Bo rozumiem, to jest największy konflikt.
Because as I understand, this is the biggest conflict, military conflict in Europe since the Balkan War.
Więc przypuszczam, że jest bardzo dużo pracy.
So I assume that you are very busy. How does it look like in practice? What was the response of other Caritases? I know that Polish Caritas is the neighboring state, is on the front line, and not to mention Ukrainian Caritas. But how does it look like with response of more remote countries like Spain, for example, Portugal?
Czy też nawet, nie wiem, czy może pani powiedzieć o
Or maybe you can tell us
znajdujących się
more
na innych kontynentach.
about other branches of Caritas in other continents.
Yes, so I think I can say safely that there is not one single Caritas in Europe that has not been responding to this crisis, to support, whether to the war in Ukraine, the people affected there, whether in the neighboring countries, where we had the example of Caritas Poland, but this will also go for the other neighboring countries, that there is support, there's assistance, there has been assistance from day one. And then, of course, there has been an adaptation of the needs have been evolving along the way. The refugees internally have been increasing enormously. So obviously within Ukraine, that response has been very important. In the neighboring countries, there has been immense support, services, food, shelter, psychological support, because those needs are also increasing little by little. The refugees have been, progressing across Europe. So I think most of the Caritases in Europe are also supporting in that sense, providing services to the refugees arriving. But there is also the financial support, obviously. I was mentioning that we are having this coordination mechanism, and that's one of the roles, or the Caritas Europa is having the lead on the coordination mechanism globally. So there's a confederation-wide mechanism. So there is financial support that is provided through that mechanism, but there is also technical support. There is also capacity building support. There is, advice on security, on safeguarding of children and vulnerable adults, and so on and so forth. We also try to ensure that the communications are being coordinated. So that's one side of it that we are trying to support from the side of Brussels, so to say, from our secretariat in Brussels. But we also do more. We also do advocacy. That's one of our tasks. I was mentioning that we are a humanitarian. Of course, we have a humanitarian mandate. So we are cautious as to what kind of advocacy we are doing. But we have been quite strong in terms of being vocal about the need to welcome the refugees. There has been this temporary protection directive that has been adopted, and that has been an important work for us. To not only the adoption, but also to ensure that it's now implemented and being followed up on. And also, that was mentioned in the previous panel, also trying to ensure that this is not taken, that the other crises globally are not forgotten. So trying to ensure that there is some visibility also to what is going on in the rest of the world. And that's also an important role of our international confederation based in the Vatican. So that's some of the work that we are trying to do, and then we are trying to ensure that we are there to support with the communications, sharing of the information, ensuring that all of the different information that is there is reaching the whole network, and also bringing some awareness to the policymakers at the European level. What is going on in Ukraine, and what is going on in the neighboring countries, and how to respond to that, and how to ensure that there will be financial support to Ukraine, to this crisis, and to other crises across the globe. So I think that's already a lot of what we're trying to do.
Bardzo dziękuję. Nie wiem, może ktoś z widowni chciałby zadać jakieś pytanie.
Thank you very much. Maybe some members of the audience would like to ask a question to our panelists.
Nie widzę.
I can see.
Myślę, że już powoli będziemy kończyć, bo ja już wyczerpałem swoje pytania.
We'll wrap up because I'm short of questions now.
Udało się nam jakoś tak nakreślić troszeczkę
I think that we were able to
taki szerszy kontekst
draw more or less the general context
konfliktu, wojny, która się toczy w Ukrainie.
Of the war in Ukraine.
Dziękuję za bardzo wartościową
Thank you very much for the very valuable
Davida Thomasa, który wciąż jest z nami.
Speech of David Thomas, who is still with us.
Z Kijowa.
Who is joining us from Kyiv, and I'm thanking also all the other panel experts who are here in Warsaw.
Zapraszam chyba w imieniu organizatorów
and
na
now
obiad, tak?
I will invite you on behalf of the organizers to lunch. Is it right? That's right. You're all invited.